Every time someone asks me whether they should book a 3-night cruise or a 7-night cruise, I hear the same thing. Well, I'll try the short one first. It's cheaper. Well, I ran the numbers, and in most cases, that short cruise is actually much more expensive per night. And the gap, it's not even close. It might surprise you. Hi, I'm Melissa, a university professor who loves to cruise and who loves to talk ship. And by the end of this, I'm gonna tell you the one factor that completely changes this equation, and it's something almost nobody talks about when comparing short and long cruises. First, let's talk about the per night math that nobody seems to do. And instead, let's look at the number that everybody looks at first, which is the total price of the cruise. A 3-night cruise out of Miami, for example, on a contemporary cruise line like Carnival, Royal Caribbean, MSC, whatever, that might run you around $500 per person. Seems like a bargain, right? A 7-night on the same cruise line, same itinerary, similar itinerary, could be $850 to $900. So at first glance, that shorter cruise looks like the obvious budget pick. But that $500 3-night cruise, it comes out to roughly $167 per night, which, by the way, side note, is a bargain when you actually look at hotel prices and consider that a lot of hotels these days are that cost, and a cruise is that, but it's mostly all-inclusive. But I digress. Anyway, that $850 7-night cruise, however, that breaks down to about $121 per night. And those numbers move depending on season and category, of course, but the pattern holds. You are very often paying significantly more per night on the shorter sailing, and that gap only gets wider when you factor in all of the extras. First, let's talk about the one that a lot of cruisers love to indulge in, which is the drink package. Drink packages are priced per day, regardless of cruise length, and you have to buy them for the entire sailing. Gratuities are also per day. Wi-Fi is per day. Port fees and taxes hit harder on those short cruises because you have fewer nights to spread them across, and most of these short cruises are nonstop port day after port day, which is also exhausting. And you don't have those sea days to really enjoy your drink package. And I've looked at this across many of the contemporary lines, Carnival, Royal Caribbean, Celebrity, etc., and the pattern is consistent. The per night cost on a 3 or 4-night cruise very often runs 20 to 40% higher than a 7-night sailing on the same ship class. Now, there's another layer that people miss. If you're flying into your port, that airfare, well, it's gonna be the same regardless if you're cruising for 3 nights or for 7. Same thing for your hotel the night before your stay. Those fixed costs get absorbed into a longer trip, but on a short cruise, they can literally double your effective per night price. Now, I used to think of short cruises as the affordable option too. And it wasn't until I actually sat down and broke down the numbers that I realized that the budget cruise was costing me way more per day. Obviously, I knew it was going to be more, but I didn't realize the significance of it compared to a longer sailing that I thought as the not as affordable option. And this is one of the most common conversations in the cruising community. People tend to just jump and book those short cruises thinking they're saving money. It's a bargain, it's a deal, it's cheap. And then they end up a little confused at the end of the sailing, wondering why it didn't really feel like such a good deal after all. So let's talk about what you actually lose on a short cruise. Now, the cost issue is real, but here's what is a bigger cost and direct when it comes to a short cruise. On those 3-night cruises, you do not get 3 days of vacation. You're really getting about 2. Think about what embarkation actually looks like. You check in, it's usually chaotic, you get on board. Even if you have an early boarding time, by the time you actually make your way on the ship, staterooms open, you're all settled in, you're getting unpacked, it's pretty late in the afternoon. And a lot of ships, they don't set sail until 4 or 5 o'clock, even later. So you get dinner and maybe a few hours that evening, maybe you can catch a show, but that is not a full day. And then disembarkation, you're out of your cabin in the wee hours of the morning, off and off the ship by 10 a.m., and your vacation, poof, it's over. That's definitely not a full day. So on a 3-night cruise, 2 of those partial days represent about 1/3 of your entire trip. 1 out of every 3 nights you paid for is essentially a logistics day. On a 7-night sailing, in comparison to that, those same 2 partial days, they only represent about 14%. And sorry to talk nerdy to you and get all professorial, but I like to do the math. So on a 10-night sailing, obviously that percentage drops even more. So the math, when you look at it in percentages like this, it's brutal for these short sailings. But it's not just about that. It's not just about the clock. There's also this settling in period on any cruise where you're wandering around haplessly, trying to figure out the ship, getting lost, learning the layout, getting into the groove. On a longer cruise, that happens on day 1, maybe day 2. But you got 5 or 6 more days to actually enjoy it once you're settled in and you know the lay of the land. On a 3-night cruise though, by the time you finally figured out where your favorite bar is and the ideal time to get onto the pool deck because it's not as crowded, it's time to pack your bags and go home. And I felt this myself. I recently did a short sailing on Royal Caribbean's Utopia of the Seas, which is a massive ship. And by the time I was ready to go home, I'm like, oh my God, I just got here. I didn't explore anything on this ship. I didn't have time. and I didn't feel as fulfilled by the cruise. Not because the cruise was bad, it was wonderful. I love Utopia of the Seas, but there just simply wasn't enough time to exhale, enough time to explore. I've already personally made the decision if I ever sail a mega ship again, and it's only available on short sailings, which is currently the case of Utopia of the Seas, which is actually one of my favorite ships, I'm gonna have to do it back to back. Now compare that, oh my God, I just got on board. I didn't have time to experience feeling, to a 7-night cruise where by day 3 or 4, you finally get to relax, you stop thinking about your inbox and all the troubles at home, and you start actually enjoying your vacation. There is a real psychological shift that tends to happen around day 3, and on a short cruise, you just never get there. You check in, you speed through it, and you check out, and you're still just wound up. That is not a vacation. That's a weekend with a nicer buffet. Now, I'm not gonna sit here and tell you that short cruises are never worth it, because that's absolutely not true. And there are 2 situations where I genuinely recommend them. The first is for younger cruisers. Some of us have full-time jobs. I am a professor. We have parental obligations. I still have a younger child. She's still in school. I have to work around school schedules. And sometimes your schedule just simply won't allow a longer sailing. And interestingly enough, to talk nerdy to you, the average age of cruisers has dropped significantly. Industry-wide, the average age of a cruiser now is about 47, which I think is a spring chicken, whereas it used to be the old people's way of cruising. So cruise lines are now adapting and offering more shorter sailings because of this very real constraint. Work obligations, family commitments, whatever it is that makes a full week impossible or very challenging. So a long weekend cruise, of course, and I have been in that situation many times, especially when I still taught in person. I'm now online, I have more flexibility. That's gonna be better than no cruise at all. So for people in that situation, comparing per night value to a 7-night, well, that's missing the point. You're not choosing between a short and a long cruise, you're choosing between a short cruise and no cruise. Now, the second recommendation, and I know this might be a hot take, if you've never taken a cruise before, you might want to consider a short cruise, but with a caveat, but we'll talk about that. Now, obviously I love cruising, but it is not for everyone. I have a friend, he took a cruise, he absolutely hated it, said he would never set foot on a ship again. I don't quite understand it, but to each their own. Some people get on a ship and they realize, I absolutely don't like this. I have maybe wicked seasickness. I don't like the feeling. I don't like the whole structure of it. I don't like the vibe, the culture, whatever. And if that might be you, if you've never taken a cruise before, it's gonna stink to be on a 7-night or longer cruise where you're just counting down the days till you can get your feet on land and get home. So a short cruise can be a really smart, low commitment test drive. But if that applies to you, here's something you really have to consider. If you are booking a short cruise as a sort of test drive, you've got to know the vibe on shorter sailings is wildly different than the vibe on a 7-night sailing. Most of these short cruises still run on smaller, older ships, Utopia of the Seas being a notable exception. And cruise lines usually put these short sailings on these old crappy ships because that's the cheaper option for the cruise lines to deploy on those routes. And on these shorter sailings, they do tend to be booze cruises. You're gonna get a lot of bachelor parties. You're gonna get a lot of people really taking advantage of the drink package. It's louder, it's rowdier, and honestly, it's not representative in most cases of what cruising looks like and feels like on a longer sailing. Now, if that's your vibe and you wanna turn up, have at it. You'll have a wonderful time on a shorter sailing. But I find that longer sailings tend to be much calmer, much relaxing, much less alcohol infused, shall we say. Now, as I noted before, we are starting to see a change in the trends of cruise lines. As I noted as the big exception, Royal Caribbean's Utopia of the Seas, they are running short itineraries on a brand new gorgeous ship, and Disney Wish does plenty of short sailings too. But for now, they're still the exceptions, and Royal Caribbean is planning to change up their approach with Utopia as well, so keep an eye on that if you are hoping to book that for a shorter sailing. Now, this matters because I've heard from so many people who look at a 3-night on an older, smaller ship and they walk away thinking, well, cruising isn't for me. The ship was crappy, the food was terrible, the service was meh, the ship was dated, but what they actually experienced wasn't cruising. It was a party boat, a booze cruise with a buffet. So if you do want to test the waters with a short cruise, just understand that the experience on a longer sailing and on a newer, nicer ship with a more relaxed crowd is a very different product than what you're going to get on a 3 or 4-night cruise on a smaller, older ship. So if you do test drive on a smaller sailing on an older ship, don't write off cruising entirely, because of the vibe, because that's the factor that changes everything. Now, the biggest difference between a short cruise and a long cruise has nothing to do with the price, the ports, or even the time math. It's decompression. And nobody talks about this because you can't put it into a spreadsheet and crunch the numbers. On a longer Holland America sailing I did a Panama Canal cruise. It was almost 2 weeks. Something clicked around day 4. I finally stopped obsessively checking my phone. I stopped making the mental to-do list. I was just there. I was present. The ship felt like a place that I had kind of temporarily lived into, not like a floating hotel. And that shift, that moment where my vacation actually started to feel like a vacation and not just a change of scenery, that just doesn't happen on a 3-night cruise. There's just not enough time. So the first couple of days on any cruise, your brain is still running on its regular at-home frenetic schedule. You're thinking about all the stuff at home, what's waiting for you, your inbox piling up. It takes time to let that go. But by day 4, on a longer sailing, your body finally believes you're on vacation. You sleep later, you linger over breakfast, you know where the heck you're going, you know your favorite spots on the ship, you know other cruisers. And that shift is what a cruise is honestly supposed to feel like. So a 3-night cruise, it's fun, it's cheap, not per night compared to a longer one, but it is your bargain value if you look at it purely from the perspective of the fare. But you know, as I always say, any day at sea is better than a day on land. So short cruise, long cruise, whatever, I just want to be on a cruise.